pray to the senior devotees here today, Adi Purush Prabhu and Arjuna Prabhu, whom are always encouraging, wise, and I hope that I can find the right things to say today so that I may serve the Vaishnavas and also the Bhagavata, the person and the book Bhagavata. I'd like to do some service to that, the community of Vaishnavas. So we are starting here a new section of the Bhagavata. We spent a good amount of time speaking about Vamanadev and Bali Maharaj, and now we are going to begin a short discussion of what's known as the first avatar, the Das Avatar. Actually, I wanted to look up one other thing too. We have here. Let's see. The first avatar is in the Das Avatar, at least the Das Avatar Stotra, is Matsya, which is Krishna's, Vishnu's fish incarnation. So let me see. So the question that's put here by Parikshit Maharaj, he asks, explain to us what is the purpose of taking this incarnation as a fish? And he looks at the fish as a kind of a terrible, abominable, translated as an abominable form. But here we say, he says the word Matsya,
Kulapradip Prabhu, we are not able to hear you.
Fish can be quite beautiful, maybe not the most developed in terms of intelligence. So we asked this question.
Sorry, devotees. I think he has an internet issue, so he should be back. Yeah, he is already.
Sorry. So, sorry, I don't know, just stop. But so Parikshit Maharaj is asking, why take this form as fish? And the response we'll see in the following verses. I won't go too deeply into the response here, but generally he says, just briefly, for the sake of protecting cows, brahmanas, demigods, devotees, the Vedic literature, religious principles, the principles to fulfill the purpose of life, the supreme purpose of incarnations. So I think I just wanted to speak a little bit about the avatar. If anybody's taken or is familiar with the Bhakti Sastra, the verses that are most commonly associated with this question about explaining why does Krishna appear, it comes from the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada cited one of these verses in his own purport. The first one, the one he cites is Yada abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srajamyam. And that means that whenever there is a decline in religion, or religious practice, and that there's a rise of irreligion, Krishna himself descends. So if anybody, this is just based that come in our Gaudiya tradition. Like these verses are very important for explaining the reason for this incarnation, or the avatar. I'll say avatar. Difference between avatar, incarnation, and the transcendent. The idea of God is transcendent, and the idea of God is immanent. So the first verse was in chapter 4:7. That's yada yada hi dharmasya. The second verse is the following verse. Paritranaya sadhanam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartare sambhavami yuge yuge. And so he says in the first, so to explain why he has come, why does he come? First thing he says, well, if there's a decline in religion or religious or dharma, I come. And when there's a rise of what's adharma, which is a rise of irreligious principles, this is the time that he himself will come. And the following verse he says, Paritranaya sadhanam, deliver the sadhu. He's going to raise the pious. And then vinashaya chaduskritam, that means to annihilate the dushkritam, the miscreants, the people, the evildoers. And then dharma samstapanartaya, meaning to stand, to restand, to reestablish dharma. So those are the reasons, answering the question, why would you appear? He appears according to the circumstances. And in the circumstances here, Matsya, just like in many religious traditions, there's a story of a flood, and that will happen here, a great inundation of the world. And so Matsya will be the avatar here to bring people, to save the sages for the following age. So those are generally the ideas, right? So Vishnu will incarnate, well, quote unquote incarnate. Krishna will be the avatar because there's a rise in irreligion, or a decrease in religion, a rise in irreligion, and then he will come to save the devil, save the sadhu, and then to annihilate the miscreant. So now that explains so that kind of answers the question of Parikshit. The other question he asks then is, why take this form? Yes, there's a reason, because it's the Leela, but it's more of a question of what is that form? And so, again, in the same chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, another verse, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo viti tattata tyaktva deham punar janma naitimam eti sarjana. Meaning, one, if you understand the janma and karma that of Krishna, that's divya, you will not take birth in the world again. But what that also means, I think more clearly, he says in the verse before, I think more clearly. So those three verses, I just have to say, in the Bhakti Sastri, we had to memorize those verses. So those are verses that we get tested on it, and those are, I guess I just had to say them because I just always remember them. But the verse that wasn't memorized for me was the verse before, which explains exactly in response to Maharaj Parikshit's question. It's Ajopi son Avyayatma, Bhutanam Ishwaropi son, Prakritim Svam Adishtaya Sambhavamyatma Sambhavamyatma Mayaya. So although he says, although I am Aja, I am unborn, and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I'm the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in this world. So he is Aja. That means that when he comes and takes this form as a fish, as Varaha, as Vamana, it is still transcendent in that form. So that's why it's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation when you say avatar and incarnation, because incarnation means incarnate, means to be in flesh, and that indicates that there's some type of like flesh material. But the idea is that this is that Krishna or Vishnu's incarnate, that Vishnu's appearance is not flesh, and he is still transcendent. He's still Aja. So the idea of incarnation we get, I think it's a term that we use. It does, generally refer to in a Christian term, the incarnation, like Jesus is the Son of God because he is God in the flesh. He's come as man, while God himself, the Father, is still transcendent, but Jesus comes in the form of man. But that is not necessarily exactly one-to-one equated with avatar. Avatars is transcendent, absolutely. So there's a lot of, sometimes we use certain terms like even like soul or atma. They might not be exactly the best one-to-one translation for a term. There is like certain, aspects of Christian theology which are, or all theologies that are universal. But for something like that, like avatar means to cross. Avatar literally means to cross over. So it's not exactly the same kind of implication of being born of flesh incarnate. So now there's a few other things here I think I'd like to look into here. Hold on. So let's see, there are a few other verses that I think are quite important. I'm just going to go through it a little briefly, the different types of incarnation, avatar, incarnation, different types of avatar. There are many, but some of the more prominent ones are like the Guna Avatar, meaning we use when you hear like the Hindu Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. There isn't like really, it's not also accurate. I think that was also a Western interpretation of the tradition. There is no real trinity of Hinduism like that. It's because they were, I think the early like Western people that studied Indology were trying to say in some kind of collective way that people worship Vishnu, Shiva, or Brahma. Those are the main deities, but there's one temple to Brahma in all of India. There's only one in Rajasthan, maybe two. So there's a story behind that also, but it's more representative in the Purana as the Guna Avatar. The Guna Avatars, meaning that Brahma is the different representatives of the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And so Vishnu is associated with sattva, and Brahma with rajas, and Shiva with tamas. So those different gunas. Those are Guna Avatars. And there's Leela Avatars. Those are avatars like we have here, that they're taking birth to enact a certain specific transcendent pastime. There's a Yuga Avatar for the different yugas, Satya, Dwarpa, Treta Yuga, and Kali Yuga. There is a yuga for each of those periods of time. So in our tradition, we have different, there's like a Shakti Avesh Avatar, which means that it's a person, but they're empowered by Ishwara, by God. But they can be a jiva, they're a soul. They have empowerment they have the Shakta, the Shakti. They're empowered by the divine. Those are Shaktivesha avatars. That's generally in our Puranic tradition. Those are different types of avatar. And then one thing I learned from the Sri Vaishnavas, Pancharatra, from the Pancharatra, is that there's 5 aspects of Ishwara. There's Para, Vyuha, Antaryaman is one, Archa, that's the deity, and then there's Vibhava. Yeah. But Para is the highest form of God. That's the transcendent supreme. And then there's the Vyuha are the expansions that kind of deal with the creation of the universe. Then there's the one are the avatars. That's, I think, Vibhava. And then Antaryaman is Paramatma, actually, in the Sri Vaishnava tradition. So that Atma, that's the part of Ishwara that is with everyone, is Paramatma, and they call that the Antaryamin. And then there's Archa, that is the deity, the form of the Lord that's come as the deity. So these are also an idea. This is also a concept of avatar. Now, I guess so. I have generally given an idea of avatar. I didn't want to get into too much detail because it's just like enumerating things, and nobody wants to hear that. Well, it is interesting, but it could be, it's like a class, but it's Bhagavatam. It should be relishable. So one important verse, I think. Now, avatar, as we said, that there is Krishna gives these reasons for why he descends. But in the Gaudiya tradition, we have a very specific and unique contribution, in my opinion, and others, is that the very specific contribution to theology is the idea, one, of rasa, and the idea that of what I feel is like a very personal God, which is kind of encapsulated in this verse of Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. Ete chamsa kalapumsa Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridyanti Yuge Yuge. So when we say, we're talking about all these different avatars. Krishna comes as these different forms. But when in this verse where he says Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam, that means that when you say like Sva, that means your personal aspect. So if you say Swadharma, that's your Dharma or your Swarupa. But here it says Bhagavan comes as Krishna to be Svayam. That Bhagavan is he himself. That he is, that is really how God is. That, I think, is a very kind of unique attribute. And I remember I mentioned this before. I'd heard that it's wrong to think that Krishna is an aspect of God. It's just one kind of, being God is an aspect of Krishna. There's so many different functions: omnipotence, omnipresence. Those are aspects of divinity, but they're just aspects of Krishna. The main, the most divine aspect of that absolute, that truth, is Krishna himself, being himself. This is God being himself. It's the highest form of God. It's the highest form of any absoluteness. We may, we may pray to God for blessings or peace or things like that. Those are functions of a deity, of God as a deity. But Krishna, this is Bhagavan Swayam, that the all-powerful is simply being himself, and its highest form. It's hard to, I'm not sure if I'm conveying that exactly, but that idea that we don't, to worship God doesn't mean to pray and ask for certain things. It means to relate with God as he is. And that's a very hard thing for some people to accept, because we want to project an idea of God as a functional, to have function. And it's not that he is not, that the idea of God, the theology of God, it's not that it's not there. But in the case that, but it also included in the case, or the idea of God, is that God is himself. He wants to be himself. So that is the idea of Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So we can talk about all these different avatars, but if we're to be to the highest level of prayer, interaction, worship of God, is to interact with him as he is, as he wants to be. It's not even as he wants to be, but as who he is, right? Just like I said, you may have a swarupa, you have a swadharma, that's who you are. But this is God as he is. It's the highest aspect of God, its personality. So that is the very kind of idea of that's kind of conveyed by our Gaudiya tradition, that God is a person, and God is not just a omnipotent, omnipresent being, but he is a person interacting with a living entity on the highest platform, on its highest level. So let's see here. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. I think there are a few other things about Krishna's. That's like a starting point. When you understand that God is a person, there are other things that are, when we think of Krishna, if you understand this principle of Krishna, then when you try to understand his form as Chaitanya, when he tries to kind of see himself, what it means to be a devotee, it's more profound, it's much deeper. And then also what the holy name is, how he's available to everyone. Dinabandhu Prabhu had a nice class the other day. I was really appreciative how he was looking at the different incarnations of Krishna, but the name of Krishna is so merciful. And I remember one Gaudiya commentary said that Krishna's name is more merciful than Krishna's form, the Krishna Rupa, because the Krishna's name will even dance on our tongue, in our mouth, like in the mouth. He's available, so supremely available to us via the holy name. That's how merciful the name of Krishna is. It's a very, very merciful form of God, of Krishna. So I was appreciating that, some of those words that Dina had said. And if there's any other thoughts on the idea of the avatar, I think I just did a cursory discussion on that. I have to admit, I was a little rushed this morning. I apologize for that. But I could also, if you want, we could look into stuff. Hare Krishna. Gail?
It's me. Yes.
Hi, Gail. So nice to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so when you're talking about, Krishna's name versus his, godly position, I just kept thinking of something that Dhanada Maharaj likes to say. I think he puts it something like, personality trumps position, meaning that, personality is higher than position. And when a person's position is the thing in focus, that position that covers the personality. So, yeah.
Yeah. See, I think that's part, like, I also am careful because at some point a few like months ago, I was just really contemplating this idea of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, and people who perform Vaidhi, and or like Ishwara versus Madhurya. And sometimes when we read literature, it seems like there's like, obviously there's some type of hierarchy. It seems like it. But that Ishwarya, that worship, like when you see it truly, you don't feel like, I just personally haven't felt like when I observe it, like you go to Vrindavan, you see all these beautiful temples on Basant Panchami, and this beautiful sweet puja, and like you go to Radha Shyama temple, it's just like old Mataji, she's just doing her puja. It's so sweet. You go to South India, it's these huge, enormous temples, and they have festivals and they have carts, and the worship is like all day, very elaborate. It's hard for me to not see that, to make there is a distinction, but they're both just overwhelming, like feeling just overwhelming devotion and love, incredible love. So I guess the point I'm saying, when you're talking about position versus the personality, the position and the personality are both incredible, like God as that awe-inspiring being. God we see that beauty in God in many ways. Like in spring, he says, like the vibhuti manifestations, yat vibhuti matsabam Srimad urchitam evava. Even these most beautiful things in the world, that you could see that as Krishna. It's not necessarily that, it is him in the same way, but is it not? It's so inspiring, even the position, even the, those other things, but that there's something about that person. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
So I'm just thinking then, that if that position, as you were describing, as you have seen in your own experience, if that can be so overwhelming and inspiring, and so, the beauty of that to be so, wonderful to behold. So I just feel that, my goodness, if you could, and that's only the position. So then I would imagine that, boy, to have an intimate relationship with somebody in that awe-inspiring position must be like really kind of over the top. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. Like I was thinking about also the Dhammadarastakam, Namam Ishwaram Sachit Ananda Rupam Lashat Kundalam Gokulam Pajamanam. Like, this is Namam Ishwaram Sachit Ananda Vigraham. This is the form of Ishwara Sachit Ananda, and he's come to Gokula. He's just a boy playing with cowherd boys, and Mother Yashoda sees that for an instant in his mouth, the universe, but she's overtaken by her love for him. It's like you look in the mouth like, oh my God, like everything every yogi's ever wanted to know, every sage or philosopher, Jnani wanted to know. They see the answer, and it's overwhelming. And then what's more powerful than that realization? Love for that, for him, for Krishna. It's both overwhelming, but yes, that sweetness, I think we all here, sitting here, feel that is the type of way that we would worship. We want to see God in that sweet way. I would think, as we're all here in the Chaitanya tradition, following Srila Prabhupada.
Kula, before I pass, thank you. Before I pass the mic on, can I just make sure that I got this point straight about incarnation versus like avatars, because this has come up for me recently. Did I understand properly that, incarnation is not really an accurate translation for avatar, because incarnation means that, spirit that is encased in flesh, and Krishna never really does that. Like you said,
Right.
Avatar means to cross over from the spiritual to the material world, and he never. So incarnation is really inaccurate as a description for what Krishna does when he comes to this world. So did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, I think, that is the problem of translation, because with terms come with like, it's not just a word, there's there's an entire cultural meaning behind it. So when we use terms like incarnation or soul, it carries with it a type of Christian theology, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just saying that it might not be the accurate one-to-one expression of that term. And that's just a reality that you'll see nowadays. Like when people translate Sanskrit, they'll just leave the Sanskrit word instead of trying to translate it. Like dharma, just leave it as dharma. Don't try to translate it as religion or duty. If you just leave it as dharma, then maybe that's easier or more true to that translation. So the same with avatar in incarnation. Literally incarnation means incarnate. Karna is flesh.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's clear, like in the verses that we read today, that Krishna is still Aja. His body is not flesh. His body is still transcendent. And we do this with the Archa Vigraha. When you see us do Prana Pratishta, we do one day where we, by mantra, that Murti, we are taking away the marble through mantra, and we're installing spirit by mantra into each part of the body, foot, ankle. And so the idea is that the deity is not this, the Archa Vigraha is not just material of the world. I mean, whether you accept that or not, but that's what the ritual is. That's what we do. That's what we've done. So, yeah, that idea, that is, yeah. I mean, the idea of that, you're saying the avatar, the transcendent crossing or interacting with the material, that is the problem of duality that all philosophies, the orthodox schools of philosophy, like definitely Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, the other three also, but not as much as they. Definitely Sankhya, the Purusha Prakriti duality, like how do they interact? People argue and debate that, have argued and debated about that for like centuries. It's hard to reconcile. But as far as the incarnation is concerned, yeah, that's my take. Yeah, I think a lot of people might agree with that, or some people would agree with that. Maybe it's not the most accurate translation or usage of it.
So then, if it's not accurate, then why would you? If it's not accurate, then why would you say it's not wrong? You were saying earlier it's not wrong to use that word.
It's not wrong because it's English. When we speak, if we want to just use avatar, then maybe it would be better. But if somebody says incarnation, I'm not going to stop them and say, hey, get nerdy and hey, excuse me. Well, actually, I don't want to be that guy. Excuse me, sir. On the contrary, I don't want to be that guy.
But you can think it though, right?
I like to hear what a person says, and if they say incarnation, I have no problem with it. Like, if they just talk about Krishna's name and it's relishable, you say incarnation all you want.
Okay, well, I'll be that nerdy guy who thinks it. Yeah, technically is not the right word, but yeah, I'll let you slide on that. Okay.